Welcome to the deep dive. Have you noticed the buzz around mild hyperbaric therapies? You know, the ones being offered for pretty much everything from wellness to boosting energy.
Oh, definitely. They seem to be popping up all over the place.
Yeah, so today we're diving deep into what the experts actually think about all this. First, maybe just a quick primer. Traditional hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT.
Right, that's where you're breathing enriched oxygen in a pressurized chamber. The pressure is quite significant. Think of going down about, say, 20 meters underwater.
Okay, and that's a well-established medical treatment here in Europe, isn't it? It's regulated.
Absolutely. It's a Class II medical device under the Medical Devices Regulation, the MDR. Very established.
But then you have these mild therapies emerging.
Exactly. And they use much lower pressures, maybe like being only 5 meters underwater, something like that.
And they're often marketed for, like, general wellness.
Yeah, general wellness, boosting energy. And that's really where things start to get, well, interesting and maybe a bit concerning for the experts.
Precisely. So our mission today is to really unpack a joint statement that came out. It's from the European Committee for Hyperbaric Medicine, the ECHM.
Which is basically the main group of European experts in this field.
Right, and the European Underwater Barometrical Society, the EUBS.
Yeah.
They put this out back on December 20th, 2022.
Yeah, so it's their combined expert opinion on these mild therapies.
Those who want to understand, what are they saying about the safety aspects? What about the rules, the regulations, and all those wellness claims you see advertised?
Ultimately, the big question is, are these mild therapies just a harmless wellness trend, or do they actually carry hidden medical implications?
And it sounds like the ECHM and EUBS have a pretty clear answer in their statement.
They do. They really lay out their perspective.
Okay, so let's get into their core argument then. They seem to come right out and say that anytime someone is breathing any gas inside a pressurized chamber, it doesn't matter how low the pressure is or how much extra oxygen, they see it as a medical procedure.
Yeah, that's fundamental to their position. It's statement one in their paper, basically. They aren't drawing a line saying, oh, below this pressure, it's fine. Above it, it's medical.
Yeah.
No, they're saying the very act, being in that pressurized environment, breathing a gas mixture that might be altered, that has physiological effects on the body.
Ah, okay, so it's inherently medical just by its nature.
That's their view. It's not something to be treated casually, like going to a spa for a massage. It requires medical oversight because there are inherent risks.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. Okay, so if they see any use as medical, what's their take on the regulations for these mild HBOT chambers that are being marketed, maybe just for wellness?
Well, their stance is pretty firm on that too, that statement too. They argue that these chambers, whether they're explicitly advertised for treating something or just for general wellness, like, boosting energy, they are medical products, period. And because of that, they absolutely must comply with the EU's medical devices regulation, the MDR.
The MDR, right. Regulation EU 21/745. That's the big one for medical devices in Europe.
Exactly. It's the framework to ensure medical devices are safe and actually work as intended.
So even if a company is trying to frame their low-pressure chamber as just a wellness booster, the ECHM and EUBS are saying, hang on, legally speaking, this needs to meet the full standards for medical devices.
Precisely. And they specifically mention the Class IIb classification under the MDR. That's not insignificant.
Class IIb? What does that mean practically?
Well, medical devices are classed based on risk. Class 1 is low risk, like bandages. Class 3 is high risk, like pacemakers. Class IIb is for devices with a moderate to high potential risk, so they require much more rigorous assessment and oversight than lower class devices.
Okay, so it signals a certain level of potential risk that needs careful management.
Definitely.
What if these devices don't meet these requirements? What are the potential consequences?
Now that's where statement 3 comes in, and it gets, well, quite serious. They point out that operating a device that should be classified as Class IIb but hasn't gone through the proper evaluation by the Medical Devices Coordination Group, the MDCG.
That's the EU body that coordinates the assessments, right?
Yes. So if you bypass that evaluation, you could actually be facing legal trouble. They specifically mention Article 113 of the MDR.
Wow, so real legal penalties, not just a slap on the wrist.
Potentially, yes. They state it might be punishable by law, and they add that national authorities across Europe are currently in the process of implementing and enforcing this.
So it's becoming actively enforced.
They're pushing for it. The ECHM and EUBS actually urge hyperbaric experts in countries where enforcement might be lagging to, lobby their national authorities to get it fully implemented. They even reference a specific MDCG guidance document, MDCG 2021-24, which helps clarify how devices should be classified.
Okay, so the legal and regulatory side is quite strict in their view. What about the actual physical safety features, the chambers themselves? What standards do they insist on?
They're very specific about this in Statement 4. They say all hyperbaric chambers, doesn't matter if it's a big multi-place one holding several people or a smaller monoplace one for just one person.
Yeah.
They must adhere to specific European norms, these EN standards. They list EN 114931.
Okay, what's that for?
That's the main standard for designing and building multi-place pressure chambers for human occupancy. And then there's EN 16081, which covers the crucial fire prevention and extinguishing systems.
Fire safety, right? Always a big concern with oxygen.
Absolutely critical. They also mention a German standard, DIN 132564, which specifically applies to monoplace single-person therapy chambers.
So these aren't just like suggested guidelines. They see them as mandatory requirements for safety.
Yes, essential safety standards. And on top of the physical standards for the chamber, they stress the need to follow the European Code of Good Practice for Hyperbaric Oxygen Therapy.
That's their own code from the ECHM.
Yes. And maybe most importantly, they emphasize that the staff operating these chambers, any hyperbaric chamber, must be properly trained and qualified.
Trained how?
According to established guidelines. They mention the ECHM EDTC standards for physicians involved and the EBSCHM manual for the technicians, nurses, and other operators who run the chambers day to day.
Wow. So it really highlights the level of expertise they believe is necessary even for these supposedly mild therapies. It's not just plug and play.
Not at all. Not in their view. It requires specific knowledge and training to operate safely and effectively regardless of the pressure level.
Okay. Now, thinking about when these chambers should actually be used, what's their perspective on, weighing the potential benefits against any risks? Is it just try it and see?
No, definitely not try it and see. This is covered in Statement 5. They emphasize that before any hyperbaric chamber use, there has to be a proper risk-benefit assessment. Meaning a healthcare professional needs to carefully weigh the potential benefits for that specific patient and condition against the known risks of hyperbaric exposure, even at lower pressures. And part of that assessment is considering if there are other, maybe more established or less risky treatments available.
So you have to consider alternatives first.
Yes. It shouldn't be the first thing you jump to, especially if other options exist. And beyond the initial assessment, they stress the ongoing need to monitor patients for any side effects.
Which can happen even at low pressures.
Yes. Things like ear barotrauma, for example, can happen at relatively small pressure changes. So monitoring is key. And also, you need to actually assess if the treatment is working, if it's having the desired effect.
Right. Is it actually providing the benefit it's supposed to?
Exactly. And interestingly, they point out that this isn't just a clinical responsibility. Under the MDR, the manufacturers of these devices also have an obligation to conduct post-market surveillance, including monitoring the device's effectiveness and safety in real-world use. They reference Annex 4 Part A, Section 1 of the MDR for that.
Okay, so a high bar for the devices, the operators, and the decision to use them. So bringing all this together, what's their final sort of advice or conclusion on these mild therapies and the claims being made?
Well, their conclusion section is pretty direct, as you might expect by now. First, the ECHM and EUBS explicitly advise against using any pressure chamber that doesn't fully comply with the MDR requirements.
So if it hasn't been properly assessed and certified as a medical device,
they say don't use it. They also strongly disapprove of medical professionals using non-compliant chambers, and they are definitely against using them in, an at-home setting without proper medical supervision and adherence to all the established safety protocols and guidelines we just talked about.
Right, the training, the standard.
All of it. They even reiterate that using non-compliant devices could, again, be legally punishable in EU member states.
So it's a very firm no for devices operating outside the medical device regulatory framework, whether that's in a clinic run by a professional or just someone buying one for their house.
That's the message, yes. And building directly on that, they state very clearly, and this is a direct quote essentially, the ECHM and EUBS do not endorse the use of mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy outside the conditions of safety and indications as set forth by the MDR, the ECHM, and EBS.
That seems crystal clear. They don't see mild therapy as some separate category that gets a pass on the rules.
Not at all. It has to meet the same safety standards and be used for properly established medical reasons, just like traditional HBOT.
Okay. And what about those wellness claims, the enhancing energy stuff?
Ah, yes. They finish with a very strong advisory on that. They strongly advise against the promotion and the use of these devices for claims that are basically unverified, like general wellness, enhancing energy, or claiming to treat specific diseases where there just isn't enough solid, clinical, peer-reviewed scientific evidence to back it up.
So if you see a clinic or a website advertising a low-pressure chamber for, I don't know, anti-aging or better sleep or just feeling better.
Yeah, robust scientific proof published in reputable journals.
The ECHM and EUBS are essentially saying, be very skeptical, and we don't support that.
Exactly. They see it as potentially misleading and operating outside the bounds of responsible medical practice and regulation. They're concerned these claims prey on hope without sufficient evidence and potentially without adequate safety oversight.
So let's just summarize this. It really sounds like the main European expert bodies for hyperbaric medicine view any therapy involving pressurized gas, usually oxygen, as a medical procedure, full stop.
Yep, regardless of the pressure level.
And because of that, it requires strict adherence to medical device regulations, the MDR Class Is, plus rigorous safety standards for the equipment and properly trained staff.
Absolutely. That's their consistent message.
And they are particularly concerned, it seems, about this trend of marketing mild or low-pressure therapies for general wellness, energy boosts, things like that.
Without that essential medical oversight, without meeting the regulatory requirements, and critically, without strong scientific evidence to prove those claims.
Right. Their joint statement really flags a major concern about, well, the potential for unsubstantiated claims and maybe insufficient safety measures as these lower pressure devices become more available and more popular.
It definitely does. It's a clear call for caution and adherence to established medical principles.
Which really brings us to a key question for you, the listener. Given this very clear position from the leading European experts, what does this mean for the growing popularity of mild hyperbaric chambers for just general well-being? If you're considering one, what questions should you be asking? What should you look for? Or perhaps, what should make you pause?
Yeah, what factors should you really consider before even thinking about using such a device, especially outside of a clearly defined medical context with proper supervision?
It's definitely some serious food for thought. And just to remind everyone, this joint position statement from the ECHM and EUBS, the one we've been unpacking, was issued on December 20th, 2022. So it's a very current and relevant perspective from the key experts in this specific field.